Well, welcome back, you delightful people. We love your messages you are sending us, and we're glad and frankly surprised you're still with us and listening, which is great. Producer Eloise and I love reading emails and engaging with you in all sorts of different shapes and forms. We have a real special guest with us today. We have Michael E. Long, who was the co-author of one of my favorite books, The Molecule of More. Helped me understand all about dopamine, and it's quite hard to sort of look at life through the same lens once you've read it. And he's also the author of Taming the Molecule of More, which is the sort of where it takes off where the Molecule of More left off, and it's more of a sort of philosophical inquiry about how the understanding of dopamine can shape our life on sort of a meaningful level, as opposed to just going into the science. So, Mike, it's great to be with you today.
Ben, thanks for reaching out. It is so good to be on your podcast. You do very interesting things over here. So naturally, I was flattered to be included.
Mike, first question I want to start is to understand dopamine properly. Sometimes it sort of helps to untie a lot of misconceptions people have. So what do we have to unlearn about dopamine to really fully understand it?
Here's the thing. We wrote the book because of this very question. When we started writing the book, Dr. Dan Lieberman and I, back around 2016 or so, we were in a world, as we all are, that said dopamine is the molecule of happiness. It's the thing that makes you feel good. And that's not true. If you still believe this, that's the thing to unlearn. Dopamine is, as the title says, the molecule of more. It makes you want more than what you have. And it doesn't matter what you have. If you live in a hovel by the side of the road, you want a tent. That's dopamine. If you live in a tent, you'd really like to have an apartment, or at least a bed. If you have an apartment, you'd like to have a house. If you have a house, you'd like a castle. If you have a castle, you'd love to live on the moon. Whatever it is that we have is not about some absolute goal. It's about simply increasing what we already have. And we can count off examples over and over again. Anybody listening, watching right now who thinks about their career, if you just think back 10, 12 years and how happy you were to have that previous job you had, that begins to give you an indication about how important it is just to get more, because you don't think about how happy you used to be. You think about how excited you are about what might be next.
Do you think that it seems that the sort of dopamine is central to who we are as humans, right? It sort of makes us aspirational. It makes us want for, the desired mate at the time, whatever it is, pair bonding, all this kind of stuff. But do you think that the modern world is sort of hacking this evolutionary circuit we have?
Oh, it's not hacking it. It's being hacked to pieces. That's what's happening. I think it's important to back up a little bit to understand why this is here. It's not just some folks seizing on the idea of what one particular neurotransmitter can do. Dopamine has an evolutionary purpose that is nothing less than life preserving. We can think of dopamine as an early warning system. Okay. If let's say you're a caveman, Ben the caveman. Here's Ben the caveman. So we have a loincloth or something. Feel free to dress the part for this section. Here we are. We're living in dangerous times. There could be an animal that could get us at any moment. There could be, we have to eat what we kill that same day. So if we see a berry bush we haven't seen before, maybe we want to check that out. Maybe we want to be sure we don't eat it because it could hurt us. Anyway, we need to be on the lookout constantly for things we haven't seen before, things that are unfamiliar that might make our lives better. Evolutionarily, that's what dopamine came to do. Dopamine is this constant early warning system looking out for something that's unfamiliar. It's not going to notice you don't think about the paint on your walls now or the color of your shirt. But if suddenly something flashes past your window, that gets your attention. Or you walk into your room and things are scattered about, that gets your attention. anything that's different. So dopamine is this early warning system in your brain, always looking for something new that might be worth your attention to improve your life or save your life. Now, if you're Ben the caveman, that's a good thing to have. But these days, the world isn't filled with danger around every corner. I'm not worried about where I'm getting my next meal, obviously. Okay. That's why I take the Ozempic. I'm not worried about the noise behind the mailbox being a tiger. It's probably the mail carrier. So I don't need to worry about every new thing that's out there, but my brain hasn't caught up with it. The human brain hasn't evolved to the new circumstances. So to come around to your question, here we are in the modern world filled with safety, security, but dopamine is constantly looking for something new to alert you to. And where do we find it? Well, basically everywhere, especially with technology. You pick up that phone, and every time you pick up that phone, there might be something new and exciting there. So what do? Dopamine says, keep looking, keep scrolling. You never know. Could be fun. And pretty soon you've passed hours doing that. And that's just one example of dopamine's influence. It is a part of our brain, and it's a system, not just a chemical. It's a part of our brain that was, let's say, made for keeping us safe and alive. But in a world where safety and aliveness are almost a given, at least here in the West, it's doing some nasty things to the way we feel about ourselves.
Mm. The last couple of years, the dopamine has sort of like entered the everyday like vernacular. More the sort of, people are talking about it more. People promote things that boost dopamine as a good thing. And so I'd like to just sort of unpack, like, it's neither good nor bad. It sort of depends, right? They say, an ice bath can raise dopamine 220% above baseline. And then, but you can watch a load of porn and dopamine will be boosted vastly above baseline, right? So when is boosting dopamine a good thing, and when is boosting dopamine and could be a negative thing?
Well, first, all those things that you're talking about, where people say it boosts at a 220%, it's abject nonsense. Abject nonsense. It's like trying to describe how much carbon is in the air in your office. You don't have any way to measure that. Well, it turns out when it comes to dopamine, there's dopamine in your blood, which is not the dopamine we're worried about, by the way. That has some physical qualities or some physical results, and that's not our discussion. But the dopamine that we're talking about is inside your brain, right here in this space between my hands. And there is no practical way to measure what it is doing. All we can do is look at the results of behavior, or the behavior itself. So when someone says it's 220% up, that's a person who is, we have a technical word for that in science, it's called lying. Okay? They're making stuff up. And they may say, oh, well, this behavior occurs 220% more often, but that's not more dopamine activity. The only way we can measure dopamine activity is with, well, it's an experimental thing actually in the neuron. So I get really picky about stuff like that. So what we can do is we can talk about raising and lowering dopamine activity by the choices that we make. And we can say in general that if you have high dopamine activity, you tend to be easily distracted. You tend to, these are broad brush statements, so I don't want to be a liar as well. But I do want to say that when you have high dopamine, it means that more things that would not be interesting to other people are interesting to you. I may be interested in a little flash outside the window, and you may not. I might, in general, have higher dopamine activity. Now, if I have lower dopamine activity, it's a little harder to rouse me, a little harder to get me going. So these are the broad directions. One is greater sensitivity, and hence probably greater wasted time on things that don't add up to things. And less dopamine activity is less joy, less anticipation, less curiosity. And we can branch in many directions from that.
Mm. So what does a healthy relationship or a healthy state of dopamine look like from an everyday perspective? What would that day in the life of a person who's got a great relationship with their own dopamine system as a whole look like versus someone who their dopamine is like it's completely shot to pieces? What do those 2 days look like?
Sure, sure. Well, this is really the point of the new book, Taming the Molecule of More. The first book, Molecule of More, explains in depth, in a very amusing way. I think I can even get you to amen me on that one. I think you agree. It's a
Amen.
funny tour of how science of the brain works. The second book is still funny and fun, but it explains this idea of how you can how what your day can be like, what your day is like, and how to get over some of these problems. So if we ask what is a healthy dopamine life like? Um, I'll say it varies from person to person depending on your priorities. For me, I think the best way to look at it is to say, I need to understand that it is tragic to waste what we'll call the here and now, the moments that we're in, on the promise of something that may never be. We have to decide what we invest in the moment that is worth the risk of maybe or maybe not getting things. I'm talking about, going to school. So going to school isn't for everybody a lot of fun. But if you go to university, you know that by sacrificing the hard work and time and study in the moment, down the road, you may have a career that you love, you may make money, you may get to go places and do things. So the dopamine problem is deciding how much should I spend in the moment, sacrifice in the moment, towards something in the future. And what we'd like to do is have the best of both worlds. We'd like to spend time in the present that is both enjoyable and constructive toward the future. And when that balance gets off, that's when we're unhappy. Sitting and staring out the window to no end, or a better example, sitting there scrolling on the phone. That's not really fun. It's just dopaminergic anticipation, the belief that maybe something good is just around the corner. It rarely is. So that's a lot of wasted time. But reading a book that makes me feel good about myself, that helps me understand myself better, and knowing that reading that book, I may have some application for it down the road, that's a good balance. That's a very, I'm going to say crude, that's almost a textbook kind of thing that doesn't sound like fun. Let me give you a better example, and I really feel strongly about this. What you'd like to do is spend your time in the here and now doing something that you're good at and that you enjoy doing, and that helps other people or that reaches out to the future. Now you say, well, I have a job and it doesn't mean much to me. Well, let's take a job that a lot of people might think is rather menial. And that job would be, I always think of the lunch lady at school. Who would want to be the lunch lady? And how does that add up to anything in the greater scheme of things? Oh my goodness, it's the most wonderful job in the world if only you understand why you're there. Think about when you were a kid and you would go to the cafeteria, and there was the lunch lady, and she would dip out the macaroni and cheese or whatever it was. And I remember that sometimes the lunch ladies we had were the happiest people in the place. They were enjoying cooking, they were enjoying serving, they were good at it, and they delighted in the pleasure that the kids showed. And they're, oh boy, it's pizza day or whatever it is. That's really such a good example of how the mundane can be a joyful dopaminergic experience. She's doing something that she enjoys. She's doing something that she's good at, and she's enriching the lives of others down the road and in the moment. Because this notion of enriching life or doing something that's valuable does not mean I am engaged in social justice and I shall save my allies. You can do that if you want, but we're not all cut out for that. We don't all have the need to do that, and we don't all have anything to contribute. But we can, in every case, help the people around us.
Mm.
We can, in every case, think about what matters to our little family, our community, even ourselves. Perhaps the thing that you believe in is the value of intelligence or the value of knowledge, which is a better word than intelligence. In this case, perhaps you believe in education. Perhaps you believe in justice, one of what Aristotle called the virtues. You can do things like that and change the world and never leave your house in some ways, simply by doing what you do well in the moment, driven by the dopaminergic urge to seek things within or without.
Mm. That really resonates. I think if I look back at I'm 29 now, and if I look back at each year in my 20s, you have some years that are great, some years that are not less, are not as good, and then some in sort of so years. And the years that were particularly great, and by great I mean the most enriching, most fulfilling years of my life I've had, have always been when I've tied my day-to-day activities in pursuit of a larger goal. Seems too light. Pursuit, or I mean, I know you reference virtues in your book. Something to a sense of virtue, the sort of the Carl Rogers idea of congruence between your ideal and actual self. So it almost feels like the healthy pursuit of dopamine, or at least in my experience, is when it's tied to an ideal that's sort of beyond myself a bit. And those actions of daily pursuit are okay. They've got meaning to it. This is fun. This is good. I know where they're going to go for me, as opposed to spending that effort just on sort of very, very loose pleasures like an Instagram scroll, or I don't know, the sort of mental masturbation you do with like making plans all the time without doing anything. If I hear you right, is that the sort of correct way to think about it, or I missed the ball there?
Spot on, Ben. You're right over the target. But there's one thing I want to add is that, this book, the first book's in 25 languages, 500,000 copies around the world. The second book, notice how I got my little boast in there. Isn't that great? And the new book is in right now. I think we're up to 15 translations, and I'm not sure what the sales are. I trust they're good, because I hear from people all the time. And here's the thing. You and I are sitting here talking about big philosophical ideas that really can make a difference in your life. But the people who read the book, by and large, come to me, email me, call me and say, Mike, that's all lovely, but I can't get off the porn. I can't get off the online shopping. I'm gaming too much. I'm a serial dater. I'm in a relationship I'm no longer enthusiastic about, even though I still love him. I still love her. What the hell am I supposed to do? That's where the book has its heart, in terms of volume. Now, the theme of it, of course, is this philosophical idea, but that philosophy doesn't help you when you're hurting. And it matters to me so much that you get what you need from my book. And that is, for most people, help me not hurt.
Okay.
So a lot of the stuff in this book, there's a whole center section, the probably 60%, 70% of the book goes through a list of the things that people deal with that are a direct result of a malformation of our relationship with dopamine. And that's how dopamine manifests itself in our lives to our detriment. As we say, I am addicted. I am hooked on online porn. I'm hooked on shopping, because dopamine really is the engine of behavioral addiction, although that term's technically dubious. Behavioral addiction and chemical addiction. It promises pleasure down the road, and the more you pursue it, the less pleasure you take, because you've gotten used to it. Homeostasis, we can call it, until eventually we're chasing something that gives us no pleasure at all, but we're compelled to do it, because you see, in your brain, although the pleasure can diminish from reaching some goal, the craving doesn't go away. That's how addiction works. Is you have to take, anybody who's dealt with a drug problem knows that you have to take more and more of the drug to get less and less of the effect. So you're
Yes.
taking huge doses to get, or huge hits of it to get nothing. And so this book talks about that in behavioral terms. That's really where the pain
Well, let's
lives.
let's jump in there then, because that's an interesting point. So before we get into the different manifestations of a uh, dislocated relationship, or I don't know what the terminology would be, but with dopamine, let's go into what that example you just coined there actually teaches us. So, for example, you said if someone is addicted to drugs, you have to have a bigger and bigger hit to get the same result. But I know that to be the same in gambling, and that's the same in porn. So it manifests the same across these different you know things. So what does it actually tell us about the dopamine system and what's happening there before we go into how we can sort of start to look at these things and solve them?
Sure. What's happening is dopamine is always on the lookout for something new, something novel. Okay, and we've established that. If you want, if we can agree that that is a given, we can proceed from there. So we have this 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 base point, and when we experience something, like here's a good demonstration. Let me take it out of that realm and give you the thing that'll make it clear. Let's say that every week at the end of the week, your boss comes to your desk and gives you your paycheck. And for convenience, let's say your boss gives you $1,000 check at the end of every week, Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. You take that check for $1,000. It's a lot of money where I am. $1,000. You put it in your wallet. You go about your business. Now, the next week, your boss shows up and here's $1,000 check. And then your boss says, you know what? You did so well this week. I'm going to give you $100 bonus. So she gives you $1,000 check and another check for $100 bill. Which one are you more excited about? The $100. The 1,000 is 10 times more, but that's not where you're excited. So obviously it's not about the absolute value of something. It's about the relative value of something. I got a little bit, got another $100. That's great. Okay. So here we go. The next week comes along. Your boss comes up, gives you the $1,000 check. Fine. Toss it in. And she goes, and you did great this week too. I'm going to give you another $100. Oh, that's great. Now you're really pumped over $100. Okay. 3 weeks, 4 weeks. This keeps happening. By the fifth or sixth week, you and I both know what you're doing. $1,000. Thanks. Extra 100. Thanks. We diminish the pleasure we take because of familiarity.
Mm.
That's what's
Okay.
happening. It's lowering what it takes to get past what we call salience. For something to be interesting now, it has
Yeah.
to be more indifferent, and it's no longer more indifferent. It's
Okay.
just
So
I get $1,100 this week. And
yeah.
so here we are. Here we are with this new platform that doesn't give us any pleasure, but we're chasing that thing. We're chasing it so hard. And that is a good analogy to things like drugs and other behaviors that aren't good for us.
Yes. Okay. So it baked into the dopamine system is this fundamental sort of dissatisfaction, or I guess the gradual you gradually get used to things that previously once gave you a high. I mean, Shakespeare said it, all things are with more spirit chased than enjoyed, which for me sums
There
it
you
up,
go.
right?
Yes, it's a diminution of normality.
Thank you.
Uh,
Yes,
uh,
exactly.
yeah.
So off that, where this goes wrong, or is that just the fundamental makeup of humans, or can we do things about this to actually put the odds in our favor so you enjoy a bit more of life, as opposed to this sort of perpetual hedonic adaptation?
Well, what we have to do is we have to boy, I always come to this part, Ben, and I wish I had a happier way to say it. So let me just phrase it. What we have to do is preserve specialness for special things. Um, if let's see, I'm going to be a little crude, okay? So you can cut this out if you want. But if you're Hugh Hefner from years ago, the founder of Playboy magazine, for most of us, some sort of intimate physical thing is not something that happens every hour on the hour. Okay, it's kind of special. But if you're Hugh Hefner, this is constant. You just wake up in the morning, you walk downstairs, you don't even get out of your pajamas, and here we are, Party Central USA. Well, you do that after a while, it takes more and more extreme things to get you interested in anything at all. And some of those things get pretty weird and pretty dangerous and pretty depressing because the things that were once exciting are no longer exciting. So what we have to do as human beings is limit ourselves a little bit. And the book is about ways to do that, by the way. I'm not just saying go forth and sin no more. We want to preserve the special feelings, the special times for special times. We don't want to do the most extreme thing all day long because our brains crave something beyond that. I'll give you an example of how you can break that system. Neil Armstrong went to the moon, and afterwards he was I'm sorry, Buzz Aldrin. This is who I'm talking about here. Went to the moon, and afterwards he was terribly depressed. Went into alcoholism for a long time. Why? in large part because there was nothing left. When you've been to the moon, how you gonna top that? And there he was, the greatest achievement in the history of humankind. And he was depressed and broken because there was nothing left to do.
But
So
they
if
say
we
that.
preserve it, we can do better.
Okay, but they say that with Olympic medalists. They say that with mothers after giving birth as well. Of like, once you get the goal, it's never, you're like, oh, and now what? So okay, so we have to preserve our dopamine and keep the special things for the special moments. But on a day-to-day basis, how do we do that? You know, this dopamine detox gets thrown about all the time. You know, is that a good place to start for people?
I'm not a big fan of the dopamine detox, but I can explain to you why it appeals and what you can do to get it right. What we simply want to do is spend more time. In fact, I'm going to back up one more time, Ben. I really appreciate your indulgence because some of these things deserve a little bit of a longer explanation. Your brain operates in two realms. One realm is the dopaminergic realm of what's in the future, what might be, what can we look forward to. And guess what? There is a grand total of one brain chemical, one neurotransmitter dedicated to that. That's dopamine. All the other neurotransmitters that are in your brain are dedicated to the here and now, enjoying things, appreciating things, consuming things, living in the moment. So, what we would like to do is to appreciate what we have in the moment, learn to live in the sensory world better than we do right now. Uh, and the beautiful thing about that is it's very easy to do. I quote William Saroyan in the book, and he said, "When you laugh, laugh like hell. When you eat, really eat it. Let the juices drip down your chin," to quote George Costanza. I mean, whatever you're doing in the moment, stop and appreciate it. Think about how it feels to have the food in your mouth. Think about how it feels to have your lover in your arms. Think about how it feels to smell the air when you walk outside, even if you're downtown in some, dirty sidewalk. Stop and think, my God, I'm alive. Take it in for a moment. When we live in the moment, we find another kind of pleasure that competes quite strongly with the possibilities of things that may never be. That's where we begin. And how do we get there? Well, one of the things we have to do is we have to fight that damnable dopamine curse, and that's what the book goes through. Things
Mm.
like, let's start with the most obvious thing for so many of us, and that is this ridiculous, amazing phone right here. One of the things we have to do is make a conscious choice to turn it off. You talk about dopamine detox. I'm far more interested in someone who says, I don't turn on my phone from noon until 3. Or I've put a block on my phone, so all I can do is answer calls. There's technology built into the thing that'll keep you off of that for whatever times you want. Or I've blocked certain websites. And I have a list of things to do when I feel like I want to look at social media. There's nothing wrong, by the way, with looking at social media. It's fun. But the problem comes when we're doing that instead of things we would in our hearts prefer to do. So
Mm.
I keep a book over here and say I'm reading. Like right now I'm reading 2 different books. It doesn't matter what they are, but I'm reading them. I'm enjoying them. So maybe I've decided before the moment happens that when I feel that urge to see what's going on Instagram, like I'm going to read 5 pages of the Woody Allen book. I'm going to read 5 pages of the Richard Russo book. And then you just freaking do it. You control your life. You just have to assert the control.
But
And
let's
it
double
will
there.
be easier as time goes on. It's hard at first, but you
Yeah.
must assert your agency.
But that's the lovely thing about it. 'Cause, our brains are so plastic, but everyone in their life goes through every single day, and they have everyone, I'm sure of it, who's got a smartphone has that, especially me, has that experience with, I just want to pick it up and see. No idea why. I don't know what the hell is going on in there, but it could be this, it could be work, it could be that email that whatever it is.
Yes.
There's that choice of like the go or the no go. Are you saying
Yes.
that if you choose the no-go, that will get reinforced over time, and then your relationship suddenly starts to evolve with dopamine in a more favorable way?
I don't want to be Pollyannish, but yes.
Okay.
If I have a choice between doing two things and one of them brings me more intense pleasure, I'm going to choose the thing that brings me more intense pleasure. If I choose the thing that is maybe I might see something on, this is my universal gesture for scrolling, by the way.
Yeah.
If I'm scrolling and maybe something will happen, let's be honest. Let's think about our experience. Most of the time it's not. Tell me 3 interesting things you saw the last time you're scrolling. You can't do it. If you're listening to this, you cannot do it.
Yeah.
All you had was the feeling of anticipation that maybe something was going to happen. But
Right.
if I said, I'm going to read in the moment, or I'm going to go walk around the damn block, whatever it is, that is something I can actually enjoy. And if I do that first time, it's going to be, well, this is for shit. But the second time I do it, it's like, oh man, that felt good to get out there. And then the next time I did it, and the next time I did it, the experience of being alive is the thing we ignore every single day. And yet that is the thing that pushes back. You can't just say, I'm going to get dopamine out of my life. That's why I don't like the dopamine detox. You can't get rid of dopamine and not replace it with something else. That's why there was a piece in the New York Times. I talk about this in the second book about these guys who said, we're going to do a dopamine detox. Did a big 2,000 word article in the Times about it. And these guys said, well, we're going to turn down the lights and we're not going to look at any screens. We're not going to shake hands. Like, what are you even thinking? You can't just say, I'm going to do without. It's like saying I'm going to hold my breath all day. Well, that's dumb. That'll never work. But if you say, instead of savoring the dopaminergic anticipation, I'm going to go eat an ice cream cone and I'm going to taste that thing. I'm going to get out here and drive my car somewhere because that's fun. I'm going to do something to replace. I'm going to put my arms around somebody. I'm going to do something to replace the anticipation, which is just anticipation. There's no consumption to it. It's just what might be. I can't stress that enough. The future isn't here, but this is. And I can replace the optimism or the hope, just anticipation, not even optimism, the anticipation of the future with the enjoyment of the here and now. And that's where dopamine detoxification fails every time. They
I'm worried.
do not do anything. They just don't replace it with anything else. They say, I'll do without. Well, guess what? You can't do without anything for very long.
Yeah. Yeah. It worries me, I think, because the rise of the smartphone, I think, has, well, at least in people I know, and maybe, I've had experiences in the past as well, where you lose the sense of what real pleasure is, and you think the good times, just the anticipation. And actually just reminding yourself to be uncoupled with that of like, oh no, that's not life. Life is in the sort of, maybe the longer term pursuit of things. And as you said, living in the here and now, right? Really savoring and enjoying that. Let's get more specific into, how does this manifest in romance and relationships? I know you mentioned in the first, but you do explain dopamine in a funny way. And actually one of my favorite lines of it was, you explained dopamine through Mick Jagger's Can't Get No Satisfaction. But yet his biographer apparently said he slept with, thousands of women, but, he couldn't get no satisfaction, which sort of summarizes this like infinite dopamine chase, right? So how does dopamine show up in our romantic lives?
Well, the story is actually very interesting. And I'm not sure how old Mick was at this point, but the number was 4,000.
Oh, right.
And if your body counts 4,000, it's a fair bet to say you're not there for the pleasure of being there. You're just marking them up on the wall like that. And that is a pure dopaminergic exercise. Now, I get into that, but that's a pure dopaminergic exercise. So what we want to do is we want to enjoy the things that we have. So if you are in a position, and I let me just understand, I'm sure people understand, I'm not offering myself up as the expert on this or the guy who's got it figured out. I screw this up all the time. I am not very good at it, but Lord knows I'm trying. And that's all any of us can do, man, is to try. And if you know how to try, your life is absolutely, I promise you one thing. If you try, your life will be better. No matter how good you get at it or how not good you get at it, you're going to get better. My favorite example of this demonstration of the frustration is George Costanza from Seinfeld. George wanted nothing but to find somebody who would be his love, his lifetime partner. And what happened every time he met that woman? As soon as he got her, he wanted out. He was bored. George wasn't in love with being in love. George was in love with the pursuit of love. He loved that maybe this is the one. I remember he married a woman, and when she died, he was overjoyed. She licked the poison envelopes and died. So here we are, and we have to remind ourselves, what is it that we seek? Is it we say I'm caught up in serial dating. I've been married a long time, but if you're caught up in serial dating, there's a good chance that you're not settling on someone. I don't mean settle, but you're not finding someone, not because the right one isn't out there, but because you actually enjoy the pursuit. And this involves sitting down with yourself and saying, what the hell am I looking for? Do I just enjoy being chased and chasing them, and the glitter and the glimmer and the excitement of new romance? Is that really where I take my pleasure? Or am I asking, as I get into a relationship, is this a person that I want to spend my life with, make a family with? There are lots of reasons to get married. Not all of them are love. Okay. There are lots of reasons to be in a relationship, and not all of them are love. Sometimes it's because, as I said, I really want to have a family in its time. I really want to have a companion. I don't want to be alone when I get old. All these things factor into it. So we have to, again, look within ourselves and say, what is it I want? And when we know our goals, it's so clarifying. We can understand that the pursuit of what might be is not the same as the enjoyment of what is. So serial, and now there are, again, I say in the book, there are specific things you can do to sort of regiment yourself toward some of these questions. But if you ask yourself, why am I dating and not finding anyone? The answer is almost always, oh, not my standards are too high or whatever. It's, I don't know what I want.
Mm. It's funny. If dopamine's all about pursuit and want and more, my understanding of this book, and as I said, I only read half of it at the moment, but it's strategies and tactics to run your dopamine as opposed to having your dopamine run you. And then if you can get clear on your goal, you can assess whether it's running you or you're running it, right? I mean, it's easier to know when you know where you're going.
Ben, I wish you could be my marketing man. You understand you understand it as well as I do. That's really good.
I don't feel like I do, because I don't think I get it right all the time. Even before this, an hour or two before.
I don't get it right. I've already said I don't get it right all the time. I really screw up a lot.
Yeah. But do you feel like it's like a muscle where I don't know if this is the right terminology, but your dopamine system is more sensitive to messing up versus actually, it's really strengthened over the last couple of months. And, I feel much more at peace with it, less distractions, less trying to be pulled in multiple different directions. Is that a thing?
I think it is. I think it is. I believe a lot of people, I'll tell you, I'm a writer by trade. I am a writer. I've been a writer for many years. I was trained as a physicist, actually. And what I've found is that you want to ask yourself what's going on as it occurs. It's so easy for people to say, well, let's engage in mindfulness. But the reason I mentioned writers is I have a lot of writer friends, and we say there are only two things in life. There's writing and there's talking about writing. And a lot of writers like to talk about writing. So I'm working on this, I'm working on that. Well, that means you're not working on it. All that means you're having more fun. I'm going to go to this conference and talk about writing. Well, then you're not writing. Your time's probably better spent writing. So if you are, so don't use something like mindfulness as a substitute for self-examination. That's really important. Don't pretend that I now have a mindfulness practice, therefore I've solved the problem. Well, first, as John Mulaney said, no, you don't. You've just said, here's a thing I'm going to do every day that I get to check the box off, which is not the same as contemplating yourself. Now, let me give you an easy way. This is something that worked for me early on. I just tripped across it, and it's going to slow you down. Real easy to do. Whenever anybody asks you even the most casual question, stop, say it back to yourself, and answer sincerely. Let me tell you how that works. I'm at the checkout, at the 7-Eleven. I go and buy myself a big 7-Eleven diet soda, but just about every day. And I get there and he goes, did you enter your number? Or he'll say, do you want anything else? And I'll stop and go, do I want anything else? No, I don't want anything else. And I check out with it. Now that sounds almost silly, but it stops me for a moment to remind me why I'm there, what I'm doing. Do I really want this soda and all that? If I teach at Georgetown, student asks a question, I stop, I say the question myself, and then I respond sincerely, whatever it is. It gives you a place in the natural flow of your day to stop and live in the moment. Sometimes it's trivial, but occasionally you learn things like, again, the guy I'm checking out with at the 7-Eleven. In that moment, when I think about his question, and I know this will sound very silly to some people, I notice that individual. I notice that man. I think, oh, I've seen him here before. Oh, he always wears that hat. Oh, he always favors that register. Some little observation, and I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but the fact is I'm now experiencing the here and now. I'm doing what I'm supposed to freaking do, which is be alive. When the singer Warren Zevon was dying, David Letterman said, "What's your big advice from dying?" And Warren said, "Enjoy every sandwich." There's a lot in there.
Mm. I mean, loads to unpack. Actually, I've noticed you doing this without knowing you were doing it. I'd ask a question in this whole conversation we've had for 41 minutes, 49 seconds, and I can see you thinking about it. And at first, I'm like, "Is there a lag? Is there?" And actually, I can feel it's considered. But then it's, dopamine feels really primal. It feels very sort of like croc brain from evolutionary hangover, whatever you want to call it. Although it's vital, maybe that's terrible choice of words, but it feels really primal. So I guess that tool of slowing down, it sort of puts you more into your sort of considered brain and gives you time to actually mull it over and takes you out of autopilot a bit. So it's like a strategy. I think that's brilliant. What other tools and I guess tricks or mental models would you try to go through life and apply to get a grasp on dopamine?
One of the things that works for some people, and this is a very difficult one, is accountability partners. An idea from the addiction community, and that is having somebody to talk to that you tell, "Hey, look, I'm struggling with this. If I'm having a moment, can I call you?" To have somebody who will listen to you. They don't have to call a psychologist or a psychiatrist. All you have to do is have somebody who will allow you to articulate it by speaking something instead of letting it just live in your head. You almost speak it into existence. In things like OCD, I stress I'm not a psychiatrist. Okay, I don't want anybody to. This is not formal medical advice. If you're dealing with obsessive compulsive disorder, one of the early things you can do to feel a little bit better is to simply say, "I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing," and just by saying it out loud, a lot of times on minor things, it'll break the spell. It's like, why the hell am I doing that? I didn't want to do that. So an accountability partner has some of the same impact. Like, here's something I'm trying to fight. Can I talk to you about it for a minute? And just by knowing there's someone you have to answer to, it knocks away some of the shame and the guilt. It takes away some of the secrecy, which ironically drives some of the desire for it, to maintain the secrecy of it. Once it's out in the open, there's not nearly the attraction. And let me stress too that you can't fix some of these problems with personal effort and happy talk. I don't want anyone who's really suffering with these things, and we all feel we're suffering, but I think we all know the difference between I'd like to live a better, happier, more satisfied life versus I really have my day interfered with now. So if you've got that kind of problem, turn this off. Sorry, Ben, turn this off and call a medical professional and get some help. They will help you. And here's the beauty part. You can get better. This is not, you don't have to live this way forever. You will get better. You will get better. And if it's something you can deal with, the kind of books that I've written, God love you, I'm happy. I want to hear from you. Go to my website, mikelongonline.com. Send me a note. I'd love to hear about your success. Please, please do. But if you're dealing with these things, get some help. You can get better. And in the book, if you say, I'm going to take a shot at this myself, and of course, the front part of the book talks about whether or not you should seek professional help, go through these chapters. Is your problem? I shop all the time, whether it's online or in real life. I'm very unhappy some point in a long term relationship. What can I do to make it better? I don't have every answer, but I have a place to begin. I have suggestions that'll help you feel better. Things you can do right now, today. If you order from Amazon, it'll be at your house tonight or tomorrow, and you can feel better in 24 hours. This is not a mystery. It's just a problem that's been obscured by the culture and amplified by the technology.
Do you think there's just as people were left and right-handed, actually, I'll read one of it. I came across the Braverman test in about 2015. I don't know if you've heard of the Braverman test. You have, of course. And whether it's accurate or not, I have no idea, but it is interesting. And it says, for people who aren't familiar with the Braverman test, it's a questionnaire you go through and it gives you a split on where you seem to be defaulting in terms of your neurotransmitter profile, be it acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin, and GABA, and all of them represent something different. GABA being the brakes, acetylcholine being the sort of nitric oxide boost for your brain, dopamine being the seek, more, pursuit, and serotonin being calm. The question is, how accurate do you think that is? And do you think we come out of the womb with a sort of genetic predisposition to more dopamine, less dopamine? What do you think about that?
Well, first, we do come out with an absolute genetic predisposition. That's a given, and we know that because some people have systems that are highly out of tune with the middle of the bell curve, and they suffer greatly because of that. So we know for sure we're born with some of these things. The question is, can we change them? We can change them with compounds, chemicals, treatments, behavioral modification by ourselves or driven by others. So definitely we are born a certain way on that range, and we can change it. Is a particular test like the one you talk about, is that a precise test? Well, it's a useful test, but let's get away from this belief that somebody's out there measuring particular activities of neurotransmitter. I'm not accosting you about this, Ben. I'm just saying there's this happy thing we say about, well, we've got this much more dopamine activity. You can't measure it. It's only been measured in the past few years in a lab. And what matters is what's happening inside an individual cell. Mm. So even if I say you have this volume of dopamine in your brain, that tells us absolutely nothing, because it's like saying, well, I've got a bunch of oil in the trunk of my car. It's not helping the engine. If you got an electric car, you got a real different problem. Mm. So what we want to take from tests like those is not, I have more or less dopamine problem or serotonin problem, or maybe I need some more GABA. And we could all use a little more GABA, frankly. But anyway, what we want to do is we want to look at the behaviors themselves and figure out what we can do to modify the behaviors and worry less about particular dopamine levels. Now, the reason I talk about dopamine so much is because, number one, it's misunderstood and it deserves to be understood. And number two, by understanding it without quantifying the particulars of its chemical action, but by understanding it, we gain a model to think about our own behavior. And that's how we think about everything. Language itself is a model of reality. Numbers, mathematics are a model of reality. The idea of the neurotransmitter system in the brain is a model of behavior. So we can talk about things like dopamine and serotonin for things like community, for instance, with oxytocin, norepinephrine. We can talk about these things, about the behaviors they are associated with, the feelings they are associated with, the qualia, there's one to look up, that they're associated with. But make no mistake, we're not engaging in chemistry. We are engaging in a modeled way to think about behavior and its modification. And that's a very useful model to understand dopamine and its quite unique and misunderstood role in the human day.
Mm. Yeah, it's a really timely point. Everything's just sort of rough approximation of being right, but it might be the best we currently have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's very interesting. I mean, we certainly do understand a lot about neurotransmitters. We I mean, it's a fascinating field, and it's growing so fast. We understand more today than we understood. I mean, leaps and bounds than we understood even 10 years ago, let alone 20, 30 years ago. So I'm not saying these things aren't true, but I'm saying as lay people, to talk about more or less dopamine is to substitute a scientific sounding discussion for the hard work of thinking about and working on your own behavior.
Yes. Okay. That makes sense. I'm glad we cleared that up. And just briefly, it's my understanding is why it's so hard to measure neurotransmitters in the brain is they're almost like fireworks. You know, they go like that and they're gone. And they're so complex and so many things going on in the brain that A, it's completely invasive. B, we can't get in there, and C, it's gone before it's gone in a flash. So to even try and measure it is just a complete nightmare.
Well, it's actually you're right on the mark, and a good way to analogize this is like fireworks. If you see a sky full of fireworks, you say, "Well, I saw fireworks last night. I saw a lot of fireworks. I saw a few fireworks." But to understand exactly what you saw, you would have to, at one moment in time, identify every flash in the sky, and then you'd have to quantify every flash in the sky. So all we can do is talk about fireworks in broad terms. And now
Mm.
we're just talking about fireworks. We're talking about the brain. We're talking about all these different reactions, as you rightly said, happening in super microscopic places, having to be measured all at once with tools that do not exist.
Mm. Okay. So when did you start working on? Was it 2015 you started working on the molecule or more?
Sometime in there, yeah, 2015,
Yeah.
2016, about 10 years ago, yeah.
Okay, so 9, 10 years ago, and but you've also had, as you said, you've been a writer for years, and you teach, and you started with physics. So you go into the world, and you've got physics as a worldview, and then you're very well read in literature, and you're quoting a lot of philosophy through the book and all this kind of stuff. But when you suddenly got this lens of dopamine in the last 10 years, say, what going through that whole process, what surprised you the most?
The thing that surprised me most is how little I understood about why we feel what we feel and how it works. I think that for me, I imagined the brain as sort of uh, just a bouillabaisse of, if I may mix my metaphors, of currents and feelings and desires, and I hadn't thought about uh, the possibility of quantification, and I hadn't thought about the power of having quantified it. Now, this idea of writing about dopamine is not my idea. This came to me from my good friend and my co-author on the first book. Let's see, there it is right there. That's the first book. Um, Dr. Dan Lieberman, who's a psychiatrist at George Washington University, professor there. We've been friends for years. And we are, this will come as a shock to your listeners, but we are big nerds. Okay. And we decided one day we needed to do more than just go to lunch and talk about philosophy. So we don't much like sports. We don't Our musical tastes are different. So he said, "Well, I want to write a book, and I know you're interested in some of this." So he came to me with the work of a man named Fred Previck, and from the '70s, who had begun to investigate some of this to talk about how, as a practitioner, he might present it to the layperson. And we thought this is a big gap in the public awareness. And so that's how this came from. And frankly, I think I've wandered far from your original question now, Ben, but that's the way we got into it. Is we said this would be fun. And for those of you who are interested in the writing business, or those of you who are writers, we did it completely wrong, by the way. We said it's going to be fun to write a book, so let's just write it. We wrote, over the course of 2 years, a 70,000 word book without having sold a proposal, without having sought representation. We just did it because we thought it would be, and here's where I'm going to lose people, fun. We thought it would be fun to do. And so we wrote this book. And those of you who know about writing know that's not what you do. What you do is you write a proposal, you hope somebody buys a proposal or represents a proposal, and then it sells a proposal. But we said we're doing it because we want to write the book. If we can't sell it, that's fine. Well, we were fortunate enough to find representation literally within 2 days after we wrote the proposal, And then our agents in New York at the Great Harvey Klinger Agency managed to sell the book in short order. Interesting for people who have read the book or I hope are going to pick it up and read it. The publishers who first saw the book, half of them said it's too scientific, make it more commercial. The other half said it's too commercial, make it more scientific. So we felt like we'd probably split the difference, of course. And then the wonderful folks in Texas at Ben Bella picked it up. As I say, it sold 25 translations around the world, 500,000 copies sold, and it really changed my life professionally that way. Uh, not because it was. I'm just gonna be candid here. It's not like I made a fortune. I did. None of us made a fortune, but it gave me a way to look at the world that transformed the way I conducted the rest of my life. I do think hard about whether or not I'm spending my time usefully. I do think hard and often about whether or not the things I'm pursuing have value. And I like to believe I spend a lot less time doing things that don't please me or lead to something better in the future. And that's where we come all the way back to things like the cell phone, to things like serial dating, to things like serial shopping, to things like online gaming. Do they bring me pleasure in the moment? Maybe, but probably not. Do they add up to something in the long term? Maybe, but probably not. In fact, almost certainly not. So, what I got from this was a way to live my life that was even richer than I thought was possible. And I'm grateful to Dan for that. I'm grateful to the scientists who made this possible. I have a better life because of this, a better life.
That's a real powerful message to slowly wrap this conversation up with as well. And it's a big advert for your book, because I think there's person A and there's person B, and there's sort of two lives one can live. One is like immediate gratification, short hit of dopamine, doesn't quite satisfy you. It might be pleasurable in the short term. And then there's the other one, which is actually a bit more deliberate, a bit more thoughtful, and sort of, I don't know, lack of a better term, you're investing your dopamine as opposed to just spending it. Maybe mixing my words a little bit there, but yeah, something to that effect. I'd love to ask you a question that I ask all guests, if I may, which is, what do you believe that very few people agree with you on?
The thing that I believe that so few people think I'm right about is that it doesn't have to be perfect, like the sign says back here. Doesn't have to be perfect to be happy. Just the fact that you got out of bed in the morning and took pleasure in the moment, as opposed to thinking, what am I going to do today? We miss that in this race toward mattering. It's enough that you matter at all. I'm a Christian. I'm a really lousy Christian, by the way. I'm like the worst Christian but the fact that I'm a human being is a miracle. Why shouldn't I just take joy in that? That's enough right there. That's the first step toward having a wonderful life. He's just going, my God, look at this. I got this. Of all the ways that whatever is in me could have ended up, this is how I ended up. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. What you do doesn't have to matter. All it has to do is to be. So when you eat a meal, really taste it. When you hear a joke, think about it and laugh. When you make love, stay there a long time. When you walk outside, look at the sky. These are the things that beat back dopamine in the modern world. These are the things that we are here for. I always like to point out that when you look back, let me say this. If you think back about a week ago today, what is today? I don't even know. Today's Monday. Think about a week ago Monday. No one who's listening to this can name me, assuming it was an ordinary Monday, 3 things that they did. You just can't. You can't do it. But that time passed, and you maybe would have been better off if you'd done something with it. But you were probably thinking, ooh, this better count. I better make a memory. I better do something with it. I'll tell you my favorite example. My best friend passed away at the age of 39. And at his funeral, the guy who was delivering the funeral said, "You may not remember all the things you got to do with Kent." His name was Kent, but that's okay because they happened. And Ben, I thought, what the hell does that even mean? They happened anyway. And I was around the same age as he was when he died. But over time, it came to me. I thought, I don't remember much of the time I spent with my friend and cousin Kent, but I know that when we were together, we had a really good time, and that was the point. We had a lot of fun together, and I'm not going to remember it, so I better damn well take pleasure in the moment I'm in. Because if I'm doing it because something may be true down the road, I'm wasting my time. So the time I had with Kent, I don't remember, but I had that time and it was good. So start that today. You want to beat dopamine? Start living in the here and now instead.
Amen. Amen. Love that. Really, really, really nice, nice story. The yeah, I want to go do it today. I want to make sure if you ask me next Monday what I did Monday, the 1st of September, I want to be able to answer with something more interesting than I came up with my head. You're a super.
You're way too nice to me, Ben.
You're an interesting man. You got an interesting worldview. What any books that you've read over the years that have helped shape your worldview? Obviously, if you maybe not your own, but
yeah. Let me see. I always get the title wrong. Aside from a few missteps, History of Western Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. Pick that up, because I wish I were more well read. I'm not as well read as I would like to be, but that's a great book for anybody at any age to read. Just start it, and I took like a year and a half to read it. Read a couple pages every day. Get you a yellow marker. You'll learn a lot about why we think what we think. Some Bertrand Russell's wrong about a lot of things, but a lot of the book is overall very good. This is an odd choice. John Irving's The World According to Garp. The novel from 1979, 1980. I read that in college, and it changed my life. It was the first thing that ever really that I read that really transformed my life. That's an important book. I think there's a great book by not Ira Levin. What's his name? Thy Neighbor's Wife. Who's the author? I can't think of it. Anyway, it's a book about the failure of certain kinds of communities in the last 400 years. People hoping for more and getting less. It's a rather explicit book about the history of love and relationships. That's a great book. All those are good. I think you learn a lot from listening to comedians. I think the smartest people in the world right now are some comedians, not all comedians, but there are some comedians that are really smart to listen to. I think John Mulaney's worth your time. And listen to the rock and roll, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, the great sort of great observers of human nature, comedians, aren't they? Can't thank you enough for doing this. Such a blast talking to you, and I definitely understand dopamine way more than I did going in. So really appreciate you taking the time to waste your time with a yo-yo like me. Where can we keep up with you? Where can we find your work and follow along?
Sure. All you got to remember is tamingthemolecule.com. Tamingthemolecule.com. You can find a sample to read there. You can keep up with me. I have a blog there, new stuff, videos, reels. Follow me on social media. Tamingthemolecule.com is the key right there.
That's it. We'll
buy the book, for Pete's sake. Buy the book. Baby's got to have a meal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got to hear. There you go. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put a link. If you made it this far, we appreciate you. And Michael, thank you so much. Really appreciate you and taking the time. So thanks so much.
My pleasure, Ben. Thank you.